My ranch was burning down in a way no fire could touch. Karen was on the phone with 911, screaming that I, a man who'd bled for this land, was trespassing on her property. The sheer gall of it would have been funny if it wasn't my life she was trying to torch. For 20 years, I'd poured my soul into this ranch, 160 acres of Wyoming dirt that my grandfather tamed, my father fortified, and I swore to protect. Every fence post, every weathered barn board, every blade of grass was stitched with my sweat and my family's legacy. I wasn't just a rancher, I was the last thread holding a century of history together. But Karen? Karen saw my home as a spreadsheet line item, a plot of land her brother could flip for condos or some soulless strip mall. It started 3 months ago when Karen, the HOA president from the new gated community a mile down the road, showed up at my gate. She wore a pantsuit that screamed, "I don't belong here," and a smile so fake it could have been shrink-wrapped. Her brother, Mitch, trailed behind, all slick hair and city cologne, eyeing my land like a vulture circling a dying calf. "We're expanding the HOA's jurisdiction," Karen announced, her voice dripping with self-righteous authority. "Your ranch falls within our new boundary. You'll need to comply with our regulations or sell." I laughed in her face. Sell. This wasn't just land, it was my blood, my bones. My wife, Ellie, had died here, her last breath taken under the same cottonwood tree where we'd carved our initials as kids. My daughter, Lily, now 16, was born in the upstairs bedroom during a blizzard. Sell. I'd sooner burn the place down myself. But Karen didn't laugh. She didn't even blink. "You'll regret this," she said, her eyes narrowing like a snake's. Mitch just smirked, already measuring my fields for his developer buddies. I should have known then that Karen wasn't just a nuisance, she was a force of destruction, cloaked in HOA bylaws and a sense of entitlement thicker than the Wyoming winter. Over the next few weeks, the harassment began. First, it was petty, fines for unapproved fence colors, they were natural wood, citations for my horses disturbing the peace, they were grazing, and demands to remove my grandfather's old windmill because it was an eyesore. I ignored them all, tossing her certified letters into the fire pit. But Karen escalated. She sent surveyors to my property line, claiming my land encroached on HOA territory. She filed complaints with the county, alleging my ranch violated zoning laws that didn't even apply to me. Every day, her car would idle at the edge of my property, her silhouette watching, waiting. I tried reasoning with her once. Big mistake. I drove to her pristine McMansion in the HOA enclave, where every lawn was manicured to death and every mailbox matched. She met me on her porch, arms crossed, her face a mask of smug superiority. "This isn't personal," she lied. "My brother needs this land for progress. Your little cowboy fantasy is holding back the future." Progress? I spat. "You're stealing my home for a quick buck." She shrugged. "The world moves on, Jake. You're just too stubborn to see it." That was the moment I realized Karen wasn't just greedy, she was cruel. She didn't care about the ranch's history, about the graves of my ancestors in the family plot, about Lily growing up where her mother's laughter still echoed in the wind. To her, we were obstacles. Things got uglier when Mitch started showing up with investors, pointing at my fields like they already owned them. One day, I caught them trespassing, snapping photos of my barn. I grabbed my shotgun not to shoot, just to make a point, and told them to get the hell off my land. Mitch laughed, but Karen's eyes glinted with something dangerous. "You'll regret that, too," she said. She wasn't wrong. Last week, she crossed a line I didn't think even she could stoop to. I woke up to find my water line cut, my irrigation system dead. My crops, alfalfa I'd spent months nurturing, wilted under the unrelenting sun. I had no proof it was her, but I knew. Lily cried that night, asking why someone would hate us so much. I didn't have an answer, just a growing rage in my chest. Then came today. I was fixing a fence when Karen's SUV roared up, kicking dust into the air. She stormed out, phone already to her ear, Mitch trailing with that same smug grin. Yes, 911. I need an officer immediately, she barked. There's a trespasser refusing to vacate private property. I froze, hammer slipping from my hand. Trespasser. This is my ranch. Not according to the new HOA charter, she snapped, thrusting a stack of papers at me. We've annexed this land. You're squatting. My brother needs this property, and you're in the way. Mitch stepped forward, his voice oily. Be reasonable, Jake. Sell now, and we'll cut you a check. Fight this, and you'll lose everything. I wanted to punch that smirk off his face, but Lily was watching from the porch, her eyes wide with fear. I took a breath, forcing my voice steady. You're not getting my home. Not today, not ever. Karen's lips curled. Then you'll be arrested. The sheriff arrived 20 minutes later, a tired man named Tom who'd known my family for decades. He looked at Karen's papers, then at me, his face heavy with apology. Jake, she's got some legal muscle behind this. I don't know how, but they're claiming eminent domain through the HOA. You'll need a lawyer. A lawyer? I roared. This is my land. My family's blood is in this soil. Tom sighed. I know, Jake. But she's got the county backing her. You've got a week to comply or vacate. Karen's eyes gleamed with victory as Tom drove off. Mitch clapped her shoulder like she'd just won a prize. I stood there, fists shaking, my world crumbling under their polished shoes. That night, Lily sat with me at the kitchen table, her small hand gripping mine. What happens if we lose the ranch, Dad? She whispered. I couldn't answer. The thought of losing this place off Karen and Mitch turning my home into a soulless development was a knife in my gut. But I wasn't done fighting. Not yet. The next morning, I called every lawyer in the county, but none would touch the case. Karen's HOA had deep pockets and deeper connections. I dug through old deeds, hoping to find something, anything, to prove my claim. That's when I found it, a forgotten clause in my grandfather's will, tying the ranch to a conservation trust. It wasn't airtight, but it was a lifeline. I confronted Karen at the HOA meeting that evening, storming into their sterile community center with the document in hand. The room went silent, every eye on me. Karen stood at the podium, her face twisting as I read the clause aloud. This land is protected, I said. You can't touch it. She laughed, but it was brittle. Nice try, Jake. That trust is outdated. My lawyers will bury it. Then I'll bury you first, I said, and the room gasped. I didn't mean it literally, but the fire in my voice made it sound like I might. The fight was far from over. Karen doubled down, filing lawsuits, spreading lies about me in town, even convincing the bank to freeze my accounts. Mitch's investors started circling closer, their offers growing more aggressive. But I wasn't just fighting for May, was fighting for Ellie's memory, for Lily's future, for every rancher who'd ever stood against greed dressed up as progress. The days following the HOA meeting turned into a war of attrition. Karen's campaign against me wasn't just legal, it was personal. She spread rumors in town, painting me as a deadbeat squatter clinging to land I didn't deserve. The local diner, where I'd shared coffee with neighbors for years, grew quiet when I walked in. Old friends avoided my eyes. Lily came home from school crying, saying kids were whispering that her dad was a criminal. Each jab was a cut, but I'd faced worse storms than Karen. I wasn't breaking yet. I threw myself into the conservation trust, spending sleepless nights poring over legal jargon with a lawyer I'd finally convinced to take my case, a young guy named Sam, fresh out of law school, who saw my fight as a chance to make his name. This trust is old, he warned, squinting at the faded paper. But it's solid. If we can prove the ranch qualifies as a protected heritage site, Karen's HOA can't touch it. The catch? We needed historical records, surveyor maps, and a mountain of evidence to present in court in just 5 days. I scoured the attic, digging through dusty trunks that hadn't been touched since my grandfather's time. Among brittle letters and yellowed photos, I found a journal he'd kept in the 1940s, detailing how the ranch had been a stopover for homesteaders, a haven during the Dust Bowl. It wasn't just my family's history, it was Wyoming's. If I could tie this to the trust, we had a shot. But time was bleeding out fast. Karen wasn't idle. She sent county inspectors to my property, citing safety violations. They poked around my barn, claiming my hay storage was a fire hazard. They measured my fences, saying they were 2 inches too close to the road. Every visit was a new fine, a new threat, each one chipping away at my resolve. Mitch showed up too, always with that same slick grin, offering cash to make this easy. His latest offer was $500,000, a fortune to some, but a fraction of what the ranch was worth in my heart. I told him where he could shove it. Then came the sabotage. One morning, I found my cattle gate wide open, half my herd wandering the highway. It took me and Lily 6 hours to round them up, dodging cars and praying none got hit. The next day, my tractor's fuel line was clogged with sugar syrup, a trick I hadn't seen since high school pranks, but this was no kid's game. I installed cameras, but Karen was clever. Nothing tied back to her directly. She was a ghost, haunting me with bureaucracy and malice. Lily, bless her, tried to stay strong. She'd help with chores, her small hands tugging fence wire or brushing the horses, but I saw the fear in her eyes. "What if we lose, Dad?" she asked one night, her voice small as we sat on the porch under a sky heavy with stars. I pulled her close, the same way I had when she was 5 and scared of thunderstorms. "We won't," I lied, because what else could I say? The truth was, I was terrified too. The breaking point came 3 days before the court hearing. I woke to the smell of smoke. My heart stopped as I ran outside, Lily screaming behind me. The barn, me grandfather's barn, where I'd proposed to Ellie, was burning. Flames licked the sky, devouring decades of memories. I grabbed a hose, shouting for Lily to call the fire department, but the blaze was too fierce. By the time the volunteers arrived, the barn was a skeleton of charred beams. The fire chief, an old friend, pulled me aside. "Jake, this wasn't an accident. We found traces of accelerant." I knew who did it. I drove to Karen's house, rage blinding me. She was on her lawn, watering her perfect roses, looking like she hadn't a care in the world. "You burned my barn," I growled, stepping closer than I should have. Her eyes widened, but that smug smile didn't falter. "Prove it," she said, her voice cold as steel. "You're unraveling, Jake. Maybe it's time to let go." I wanted to scream, to shake her until she admitted it, but Lily's face flashed in my mind. I couldn't lose control, not for her sake. I turned and walked away, her laughter trailing me like poison. The next day, Sam called with news. He'd found a precedent case where a Montana ranch was saved by a similar trust. "It's not a slam dunk," he said, "but it's ammunition." We spent hours preparing, mapping the ranch's history, pulling records from the county archives. My neighbors, the few who hadn't turned on me, rallied. Old Mrs. Carter brought photos of her parents at the ranch during the Depression. Tom, the sheriff, slipped me a surveyor's map from 1920, proving my land's boundaries predated the HOA's claims. It wasn't much, but it was hope. The court date arrived like a storm. The county courthouse was packed, neighbors, ranchers, even reporters drawn by the David and Goliath drama. Karen sat with her lawyers, a team of suits who looked like they charged by the syllable. Mitch was there too, whispering in her ear, his eyes scanning the room like he was already planning his victory party. Lily sat beside me, clutching my hand, her face pale but determined. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Hargrove, listened as Karen's team presented their case. They argued the HOA's expansion was legal, that my ranch was a blight on their vision of progress, that eminent domain applied for community benefit. Their words were polished, their charts slick, but they reeked of greed. When it was our turn, Sam stood, his voice steady despite his youth. He laid out the trust, the ranch's history, the journal entries proving its cultural value. He called Mrs. Carter to testify, her frail voice carrying the weight of decades. I watched the judge's face, searching for a sign she was swayed. Then I took the stand. I wasn't polished like Karen's lawyers, but I spoke from the gut. This ranch isn't just land, I said, my voice cracking. It's my family. It's where my wife died, where my daughter was born. It's where I taught her to ride, to fight for what's right. Karen wants to tear that down for profit. She burned my barn to break me. Don't let her take my home too. The courtroom was silent. Even Karen's smugness faltered for a moment. But her lead lawyer, a shark named Reynolds, cross-examined me ruthlessly, twisting my words, painting me as a stubborn relic refusing progress. I held my ground, but doubt crept in. Had I done enough? The judge called a recess, promising a ruling by day's end. I stepped outside, Lily at my side, and saw Karen and Mitch laughing by their car. Something in me snapped. I marched over, ignoring Lily's pleas. You think this is a game? I said, my voice low and dangerous. You burned my barn. You're trying to steal my life. What kind of person does that? Karen's smile vanished. Careful, Jake. You're sounding unhinged. Juries don't like that. Mitch just chuckled, but I saw a flicker of unease in his eyes. I turned away before I did something I'd regret. Back in court, Judge Hargrove returned with her ruling. My heart pounded as she spoke. The Conservation Trust is valid, she said, and I felt a surge of hope. The ranch has historical significance, and the HOA's claim of eminent domain is overreaching. Cheers erupted from my side of the room. Lily hugged me, tears streaming. But the judge wasn't done. However, the trust's boundaries are unclear. A new survey is required. Until then, the ranch remains in limbo. Limbo. Not a win, not a loss. Karen's face was unreadable, but Mitch's smirk told me they weren't done. As we left the courthouse, Sam clapped my shoulder. We bought time, Jake. That's something. But time was a luxury I couldn't afford. The barn was gone, my savings were dwindling, and Karen's war wasn't over. That night, I sat on the porch with Lily, the stars above us indifferent to our fight. We're still here, she whispered, her voice fierce. That's what matters. I nodded, but the weight of the battle pressed harder. Karen and Mitch weren't just fighting for land, they were fighting to erase me, to erase us. And I knew, deep down, that this wasn't the end. Limbo was a cruel place to live. The judge's ruling hung over the ranch like a storm cloud, promising neither victory nor defeat. I woke each morning expecting another blow from Karen, and she didn't disappoint. The day after the hearing, a new surveyor arrived hired by the HOA, not the court. He was a wiry man in a crisp polo, snapping photos of my property lines with a drone that buzzed like a wasp. I confronted him, demanding to see his credentials. Just doing my job, he muttered, but the logo on his clipboard matched the one on Mitch's car. Karen was rigging the game before the court-ordered survey could even begin. I called Sam, who was already buried in paperwork. They're trying to redraw the boundaries, he said, his voice tight. If their survey gets to the judge first, it could sway her. We needed our own surveyor, but my bank account was a ghost town. Every cent had gone to legal fees and replacing what the barn fire destroyed. My neighbors, God bless them, started a collection. Old Mrs. Carter dropped off $200 in crumpled bills. Tom, the sheriff, slipped me $500 with a gruff, "Don't tell my wife." It wasn't enough for a full survey, but it was enough to hire a retired geologist named Hank who owed my dad a favor. Hank wasn't fancy, but he knew Wyoming's dirt better than anyone. While Hank mapped the land, Karen's attacks grew bolder. She filed a lien against the ranch, claiming I owed the HOA $10,000 in unpaid fines. The bank froze my remaining credit, and my supplier cut me off, leaving my cattle feed dangerously low. Lily noticed the strain, her eyes searching mine for reassurance I couldn't give. "We're gonna be okay, right, Dad?" she asked, her voice trembling as she helped me mend a fence. I forced a smile, but my heart was a clenched fist. Karen wasn't just after my land, she was strangling my family. Then came the final blow. 2 days before the court's deadline, I found a notice nailed to my gate, an eviction order, effective in 48 hours unless I could prove the trust's boundaries. Karen had pulled strings with the county, bypassing the judge's ruling. I called Sam in a panic, but he was as blindsided as I was. "This is illegal," he fumed. "She's exploiting a loophole. We need Hank's survey now." But Hank was still crunching numbers, his old equipment no match for the HOA's tech. I felt the walls closing in, my ranch slipping through my fingers like sand. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked the fields under a moonless sky, the silence broken only by the rustle of grass and the distant howl of a coyote. I stopped at the cottonwood tree where Ellie and I had carved our initials. Her laughter echoed in my memory, her voice telling me to fight. But for the first time, I wondered if I was fighting a losing war. I sank to my knees, the dirt cool against my palms, and whispered a prayer I hadn't said since I was a boy. The next morning, Lily found me in the kitchen, staring at a cold cup of coffee. "Dad, we can't give up," she said, her eyes fierce despite the tears. She held up a stack of papers, me grandfather's journal, photocopied and annotated. "I read it all last night. There's a map in here, from 1942. It shows the ranch's boundaries, signed by a state official. Could it help?" My heart leapt. Lily, my 16-year-old daughter, had found what I'd missed. I hugged her so tight she squeaked, then called Hank. He confirmed the map was legitimate, a primary source that could trump Karen's survey. We raced to the courthouse, Sam clutching the map like it was the Holy Grail. The hearing was chaos. Karen's lawyers objected to everything, claiming the map was inadmissible, too old, irrelevant. But Judge Hargrove silenced them with a look. She studied the map, then Hank's partial survey, her face unreadable. Karen sat smugly, Mitch whispering in her ear, but I saw a crack in her arm or a nervous tick in her jaw. She knew we had something real. When I took the stand, I didn't hold back. "This ranch is my daughter's future," I said, my voice raw. "It's where her mother's spirit lives. Karen and her brother want to pave it over for profit, to erase a century of history. They burned my barn, froze my accounts, turned my neighbors against me. But this map proves the truth, this land is ours, protected by law and love." I held up the journal, my hands shaking. "Don't let them steal it." The courtroom was silent, the air thick with tension. Lily squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with pride. Karen's lawyer tried to tear me apart, questioning the map's authenticity, but Hank's testimony held firm. The judge adjourned for deliberation, promising a final ruling by noon. Those hours were agony. Lily and I waited outside, sitting on a bench under a gray sky. "You did good, Dad," she whispered. I wanted to believe her, but doubt gnawed at me. Karen's resources were endless, mine were scraps. When the bailiff called us back, my stomach churned. Judge Hargrove's voice was steady. "The 1942 map, combined with the Conservation Trust, establishes the ranch's historical boundaries. The HOA's claim is invalid. The eviction order is overturned." Relief hit me like a wave, and Lily sobbed into my shoulder. The crowd, me neighbors, my allies, erupted in cheers. Karen's face was stone, but Mitch's smirk was gone. For the first time, they looked defeated. But victory was fleeting. That night, as Lily and I celebrated with pizza and root beer, Tom called. "Jake, I shouldn't be telling you this, but Karen's not done. She's filing an appeal, and there's talk of a federal loophole. Her brother's got developers with deep pockets. My heart sank. The fight wasn't over, it might never be. A week later, the truth hit harder. Hank's final survey confirmed the map, but Karen's appeal gained traction. Worse, the fire investigation still had no evidence tied her to the arson. My savings were gone, my cattle feed was running out, and Lily's college fund was a memory. I stood on the porch, watching the sun set over the ranch, and realized the cost of winning. Even if I kept the land, I'd lost so much me peace, my trust in people, my daughter's innocence. The bitterest pill came months later. Karen and Mitch moved on, their appeal fizzling when a bigger developer bought the HOA's land instead. But the ranch was a shadow of itself. The barn was gone, my herd was half its size, and Lily was talking about leaving for college early, unable to bear the town's whispers. I'd saved the land, but at what price? The ranch was my heart, but it was breaking me. One evening, as I walked to the cottonwood tree, Lily joined me. "You fought for Mom's memory," she said softly. "That's enough." But it wasn't. I'd won the battle, but Karen's greed had scarred us forever. The ranch stood, but its soul was battered, a monument to a fight that cost more than it saved. I carved a new initial into the tree, Lily's, promising her the future I'd barely preserved. But as I looked out over the fields, I knew, some victories taste like ash.